So when you look at a place like Nazaré, perched right there on the rugged Atlantic coast of Portugal, you're immediately hit by this friction between two totally different realities.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a stark contrast.
Right. Because on one hand, you have the absolute bare knuckle, unromantic grind of a working town. I mean, you see the ocean, the weather beaten boats. You can literally feel the salt in the wind.
Yeah, and everything about the daily rhythm there seems dictated by, well, the tide, the catch, just sheer physical endurance.
Exactly. It is a very grounded, almost harsh, utilitarian kind of existence.
It is. It's an environment built entirely around necessity. I mean, historically, coastal fishing communities just don't have the luxury of focusing on the abstract.
No, they really don't.
Their geography demands pragmatism. You build what you need to process the fish, to fix the nets, shelter from the storms. It's a landscape defined by manual labor.
It's all immediate, tangible concerns. But then, and this is what's so fascinating, layered directly on top of that daily survival grind, you have this profound, hovering mysticism that completely defies the setting.
Right. It feels like it shouldn't belong there.
Yeah, and the historical document we're exploring on today's deep dive captures that juxtaposition perfectly right out of the gate. We've got this text from the Archivo Nacional 179 titled Fastos Provincianos.
Which is such an incredible archival record.
It really is. It details the traditions and monuments of Nazaré. And the author starts by just flat out stating that this, quote, essentially fishing village is simultaneously enveloped in a legend that comes from the depths of the centuries.
I love that phrasing, the depths of the centuries.
Yeah, so evocative, right?
It is a magnificent way to frame it because it forces you to abandon any expectation of, like, a neat, predictable town history.
Right, like standard municipal growth.
Exactly. We usually think of a town's history as this slow ledger. A well is dug, then a market is established, a wall is built, and the population just incrementally expands. Cause and effect.
Very logical.
Right. But that phrase, the depths of the centuries, it warns you that the history here operates on a completely different axis.
It tells you we aren't looking at a timeline driven by commerce or agricultural yields. We're looking at a journey anchored by sudden mythical disruption.
Which brings us to our actual mission for this deep dive.
Yes, our mission today. We are going to extract the fundamental points from this archival text to reconstruct the timeline of the Church of Nossa Senhora de Nazaré.
It's going to be quite the journey.
We really want to trace the physical and psychological evolution of this space for you, from this hidden crack in a cliffside all the way to a towering 19th century architectural titan.
And to do that properly, we have to start long before any cornerstone was ever laid.
Right.
The timeline the text provides actually forces us to begin in the shadows, referencing an era long before the year 1179.
Which is a very specific date.
It is, and it establishes a backstory for a highly specific relic, an image of Senhora de Nazaré, Our Lady of Nazaré. And the circumstances of its early preservation instantly set the stakes.
Yeah, because this image wasn't just, sitting peacefully on an altar somewhere gathering dust.
Not at all.
The record notes it had been preserved by an abbot named Fray Romano, and then, crucially, it was physically hidden by a king, King Di Rodrigo.
That detail is wild.
When I read that, it literally stopped me in my tracks. I mean, what possesses a king to bury something?
It's a profound question. Think about the rigid hierarchy of a historical monarchy.
Right.
Kings do not engage in manual labor, they aren't groundskeepers, and they certainly don't act as secretive archivists digging in the dirt.
Yeah, you don't get the king to bury the royal silver just because there's a minor border skirmish.
Precisely. If a monarch is taking direct physical action to hide an object alongside a high-ranking figure like an abbot, it implies a moment of absolute existential crisis.
Like total societal collapse.
Yes. A threat so overwhelming that all normal protocols and defense are just abandoned. The survival of the kingdom itself becomes secondary to the survival of this specific object.
They are operating in pure desperation, and the location they choose is equally telling. Where did they hide it?
Well, they don't lock it in a fortified castle vault, if that's what you're thinking.
Right, or a heavily guarded cathedral crypt.
No, the text specifies it was hidden in a lapa.
A lapa?
Yeah, naturally occurring cave or grotto on the coastline.
Which is just a complete regression from engineered safety to, primitive concealment.
It really is. They are stripping away all the man-made defenses, the walls, the armies, the iron doors, and entrusting this supremely important artifact to the earth itself.
The landscape becomes the vault. It paints such a cinematic picture for you.
It does.
A king and an abbot stripped of all their pomp and circumstance, out in the harsh coastal elements, wedging a sacred statue into a dark hollow in the rocks, just hoping the earth keeps their secret.
And the Earth does keep the secret. It keeps it perfectly, right up until the year 1179.
Which is where the main narrative engine of our text really starts to turn. So 1179, this is during the reign of King D. Afonso Henriques.
A massive period for the formation of Portugal, by the way.
Huge. But the agents of discovery here aren't royal knights or scholarly expeditions. The text notes that the hidden image is stumbled upon by a group of wandering shepherds.
Which is this beautiful, almost poetic inversion of the social order.
Oh, I love that. How so?
Well, you have the ultimate high-status figures, the king and the abbot interring the object during a crisis, and then centuries later, the ultimate low-status figures bring it back into the light.
Shepherds. People living completely on the margins of political power.
Exactly. People wandering the rugged, uncultivated landscape.
It's almost as if the coastal geography itself decided, okay, the danger has passed. Time to return the secret, not to the nobility, but to the commoners.
And the reaction to this discovery is instantaneous.
Yeah, the text describes how the local populations just immediately rush to venerate the image.
What is truly compelling here is the speed of the cultural and theological shift. The text explicitly points out that the people immediately attributed great miracles to the image.
Right, they didn't pause to send a delegation to the capital.
No, they didn't wait for a bishop or the pope to issue some formal decree validating the artifact.
They totally bypassed the entire bureaucratic hierarchy of faith.
Exactly. It is pure grassroots veneration. The local community collectively decides that the object possesses localized power.
Based entirely on the context of finding it in this ancient cave.
Yes, they assert its miraculous nature themselves, and that collective belief instantly rewrites the spiritual reality of the region. The cave transforms practically overnight.
From a forgotten hiding spot into an active epicenter of pilgrimage. And, when a grassroots movement generates that much energy, that much local fervor, the ripples inevitably reach the centers of power.
They always do.
The whispers of these miracles in a coastal cave travel up the mountain straight to the ears of someone who's going to change the history of Nazaré permanently.
Yes, Dom Fuas Roupinho.
Dom Fuas Roupinho. This introduces a completely different archetype into our narrative. We've had kings, abbots, shepherds. Now we have a military commander.
And the credentials the text lists for Dom Fuas are intense. He isn't just a regular soldier.
No, he's the alcaide mor of Porto de Mós, a chief magistrate and military commander. And, maybe more importantly, he is the bastard brother of King D. Afonso Henriques.
That specific familial detail carries so much psychological weight.
It really does, because the psychology of the royal bastard in medieval society is incredibly complex, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have the royal blood, you receive the martial education, the tactical training, and you have proximity to immense power.
But you are structurally barred from the throne.
Right. You exist in a perpetual state of having to justify your status.
You can't just rest on your last name. You have to carve your legacy out of stone and blood.
Exactly. You hold the frontiers. You manage the difficult territories. You enforce the king's will. Dom Fuas is a man who relies on tangible results, strategy, and force.
He is definitely not a man naturally inclined to follow the superstitious whims of local shepherds.
Not without verifying them firsthand, anyway.
Right. So this hardened, pragmatic royal enforcer hears about this cave, hears about the miracles, and he decides he needs to see it with his own eyes.
And the text actually maps out his physical journey to the site. The architectural descriptions used are fascinating.
Yeah, he travels to Mount Ciano and finds a structure wedged between two massive boulders. The archive describes it as a small house or cell, roughly made of dry stone.
Denoting remote antiquity, as the text puts it.
Right. Think about the jarring contrast for a man like Dom Fuas.
It would be massive. His daily environment consists of fortresses, castles, heavily engineered military architecture.
Spaces designed to project total dominance and invulnerability.
And then he climbs this mountain to investigate a miracle, only to find the absolute antithesis of his world.
Dry stone architecture, no mortar, no elaborate vaulting, just unhewn rocks physically balanced and wedged together, is the most elemental, survivalist form of shelter imaginable.
It represents a stark return to the primitive roots of existence. And the text details exactly how Dom Fuas had to interact with this space to even see the image.
Yeah, he couldn't just ride his horse through a grand cathedral door.
No, he had to physically descend through a gap like a crevice between the boulders, just to access the humble cave where the altar sat.
He had to squeeze himself down into the dirt. I really love that image.
Very striking.
This powerful commander, dripping with status, physically humbling himself, climbing down into a dark crack in the earth to look at a tiny statue found by wandering peasants. It just strips away all his societal armor.
And clearly that psychological stripping away had a profound effect on him.
It must have.
The text makes a specific point to note that this wasn't just a one-off curiosity visit. He established a deep personal connection to the site.
He returned to the Lapa many times.
Yes, he became a pilgrim himself.
Which is such a crucial detail for the timeline. It proves he wasn't just some random nobleman who happened to be riding by when the climax of our story happens.
Right. He had developed a genuine reverence for the space. He knew the terrain, he knew the silence of that dry stone cell.
He had internalized the significance of the image, all of which perfectly sets the stage for September 14th, 1182.
The exact date is literally burned into the historical record.
Because it represents the fulcrum upon which the entire history of the region pivots. We move from quiet, personal pilgrimage to an event of violent, undeniable disruption.
So the morning of September 14th finds Dom Fuas engaged in what the document calls his favorite exercise.
Hunting.
And the text takes a fascinating detour here to explain the utility of the medieval hunt.
I found this so interesting because today, if you think of a royal hunt, you picture something leisurely, right?
Yeah, almost ceremonial. A way for the aristocracy to pass a mild afternoon.
But the document frames it as something entirely different, pure medieval pragmatism.
It frames it as an absolute necessity for survival in warfare.
Sure.
The text explicitly lists the prey: wolves, deer, and wild boars.
These are aggressive, dangerous, incredibly fast animals. Hunting them was not a gentle pastime.
No, it was chaotic and lethal. The author provides the logic for why they did this. It says the knights used their free time to engage in these violent exercises to toughen their muscles and harden themselves.
Because in actual battle, they had to manage incredibly heavy weapons and armor. It is essentially extreme military cross-training.
Exactly. We have to remember the physical reality of 12th century combat. A knight is encased in chainmail, carrying heavy shields, wielding iron broadswords.
Navigating chaotic, muddy battlefields.
The cardiovascular endurance and sheer muscular strength required just to remain upright, let alone fight effectively, is staggering.
You run down a wild boar through a dense forest so that when you are on a battlefield wearing 50 pounds of metal, your heart doesn't just give out on you.
It's pure conditioning, and it requires a total mastery over your physical environment. You must have perfect synergy with your horse.
Razor-sharp reflexes.
Yes, and an unshakable confidence in your own ability to control the chaos around you. Dom Fuas, as a commander, thrives in this environment. He dictates the terms of his physical reality.
Or at least he believes he does. Because on this specific morning, the environment decides to strip all of that control away.
The text introduces the key environmental variable here.
A grande nevuero. A massive, heavy fog rolls in and envelops the hunting grounds.
And fog is perhaps the most disorienting natural phenomenon you can encounter when moving at high speed.
Because it removes vision, the primary sense a hunter relies on.
Exactly. It creates this claustrophobic bubble, isolating the individual from their companions and totally obscuring the landscape.
So you have Dom Fuas, separated from his hunting party, completely swallowed by this thick, blinding fog. But he doesn't stop.
No, he is entirely consumed by the chase.
The text says he is galloping vertiginosamente at a dizzying, vertiginous speed in hot pursuit of a massive deer heading straight toward the ocean.
The narrative tension the text builds here is remarkable. You have a man trained for war, operating at peak adrenaline, riding a powerful war horse at maximum velocity, and he's completely blinded.
He is riding purely on momentum and the primal instinct of the hunt. He cannot see the terrain shifting beneath him.
And because of the fog, he is utterly blind to the lethal trap ahead of him until the very last second.
The text says that without seeing the imminent peril, Dom Fuas suddenly found himself at the ultimate point of a rock. The deer just runs right off the edge.
And the text does not spare us the terrifying dimensions of this drop. It specifies that this isn't just a steep incline.
Right.
It is a cliff towering over 200 brasas high.
Great process. How long is a brasa exactly?
A brasa is a fathom, roughly 6 feet. So we're talking about a sheer drop of over 1,200 feet.
1,200 feet. Wow. That is a sheer drop.
And the angle is described as perpendicular to the ocean, a straight vertical plunge into the churning Atlantic currents below.
Okay, so visualize this horrific geometry for a second. He is galloping at full speed. Suddenly the fog breaks just enough, or his peripheral vision catches the void, and he realizes the ground has simply ceased to exist.
The deer is already falling.
And he is on horseback, moving far too fast to brake. The document quantifies the exact margin between continued existence and absolute annihilation here.
It does. It states he was exactly duas palmos, 2 palms, roughly 16 inches from the extremity of the rock.
2 palms. The text says he was literally suspended over the abyss. It is an agonizing cinematic freeze frame.
The horse's forward momentum is already carrying their center of gravity over the edge.
Right, physics dictates what happens next. Gravity has already won the argument. He is a dead man.
But in that microscopic fraction of a second, Dom Fuas realizes the total futility of his strength. His royal blood, his military tactics, his conditioning, none of it matters.
He is entirely powerless.
And in that moment of absolute blinding terror, he doesn't try to wrestle the horse to the ground. He doesn't brace for impact. The text says he screams out, invoking the protection of Senhora de Nazaré.
He calls out to the image in the dark, dry stone cave.
And the physical response to that invocation is what forever alters the trajectory of this coastline.
The description of the miracle is written with such visceral, physics-defying impact. It says that upon his invocation, the galloping horse stopped instantaneously. De repente. Suddenly.
Which is a mechanical impossibility.
Right.
A massive animal carrying an armored man, traveling at vertiginous speed, cannot arrest its own momentum in the space of 16 inches? The kinetic energy has to go somewhere.
But the text goes even further. It doesn't just say the horse skidded to a halt. It says the animal remained so rigidly planted to the earth that it was como se fosse uma peça da mesma rocha.
As if the horse had become a piece of the rock itself.
That phrasing is magnificent, a piece of the rock itself.
It suggests a localized suspension of physical laws. The natural world, the very geology of the cliff, reaches up, absorbs the lethal kinetic energy, and fuses the animal to the stone to prevent the fall.
The momentum isn't just stopped, it is instantly erased by divine intervention.
It's chilling. One heartbeat you are plunging to a 1,200-foot death, and the very next heartbeat, your horse is a rigid statue carved into the very lip of the abyss.
And all you can hear is the ocean roaring below you and the silence of the fog. It is an impossible moment of salvation.
And that single suspended moment changes everything. It takes the quiet, localized rumors of a miraculous cave and elevates them.
It transforms the site from a place of peasant folklore into the location of a massive, undeniable, documented miracle.
Experienced by a high-ranking member of the royal family, no less.
Which naturally pushes us into the next phase of the timeline. Because how does a human being respond to surviving the unsurvivable?
If you are a medieval warlord who just dodged a 1,200-foot drop by 16 inches, you don't just ride back to the castle and take a nap.
No, you are forever indebted. You owe a debt that cannot be repaid with standard currency. And Dom Fuas acts on that debt immediately.
The record states he directed himself straight back to the humble little chapel on the mount to give thanks.
He goes right back down into the dirt, back to the dry stone cell. But he doesn't just offer a prayer of gratitude. He makes a binding physical vow.
He promises to erect a proper temple in honor of the venerated image.
And because he is a commander accustomed to mobilizing forces, he doesn't let the vow remain an abstract idea. The logistical speed documented here is incredible.
The text notes that within just a few days, he mandates stonemasons to be brought from Leiria and his own domain of Porto de Mos.
He leverages his entire political and military infrastructure to build a construction crew on top of Mount Siano almost overnight. He gives the order to demolish the ancient crude altar inside the cave to make way for a new, worthy structure.
But progress requires dismantling the past, and it is during this demolition that the narrative delivers one of its most astonishing revelations.
It's a moment of historical validation that is just as important as the miracle on the cliff, I think. I love this part of the record.
It's like watching someone tear down the drywall in a dilapidated house, only to find a hidden vault containing the original architect's master blueprints.
Exactly. As the masons are dismantling the heavy stones of the old altar, they uncover a hidden compartment.
The text describes it precisely. Something wedged or stuck deliberately between the stones. They extract it, and it's a box.
And the forensic detail the document provides regarding this box highlights exactly how important it was. It's described as a thin wooden box, exactly 1 palm in length.
So it's small, easily concealed.
But it's the interior that really gives it away. The text notes the box is lined with silk.
Think about the environment. A damp, crude, dry stone cave battered by Atlantic winds. To find a delicate layer of silk hidden inside a stone altar in that environment is a massive anomaly.
Silk represents immense wealth, international trade, supreme reverence. You only use it to swaddle objects of absolute irreplaceable value.
So they open this small silk-lined vault, and the inventory of what they find inside completely rewrites the understanding of the site.
First, they find relics, specifically relics of S. Bartolomeo, S. Braz, and other saints.
In the medieval spiritual economy, physical relics were the ultimate currency of divine power. Discovering authentic relics already hidden within a site that had just produced a massive miracle exponentially magnifies the holiness of the ground.
It suggests the site was sacred long before the shepherds ever found it.
Oh, absolutely.
But the relics aren't the smoking gun. The real treasure is a document. Alongside the bones and the silk, they find a parchment.
A written record hidden in the dark.
And this parchment contains the detailed account of exactly how and in what era the relics in the image had come to be placed in that cave.
This the connective tissue of the entire timeline. It connects the deep past we discussed earlier, the era of King Di Rodrigo and the Abbot Fray Romano, directly to the present moment of Dom Fuas.
The oral traditions, the whispers of the shepherds about an ancient king hiding the statue, are suddenly transformed into authenticated, documented history.
The local folklore wasn't just myth, it was historical fact, and they just found the receipts hidden in the altar.
It provides the site with an unimpeachable pedigree.
It proves that the miraculous power of the Lapa isn't a new phenomenon. It is an ancient truth that was merely dormant, waiting to be rediscovered.
Armed with this profound historical proof, Dom Fuas and his stonemasons proceed to build the new structure. And the name they give it is incredibly deliberate. They call it the Capella da Memoria, the Chapel of Memory.
They didn't name it the Chapel of the Miracle or the Chapel of Salvation. By dedicating it to memory, they are explicitly stating the function of the architecture.
The building's primary purpose is to act as a hard drive, basically, a permanent storage mechanism for the narrative they just uncovered.
And the physical design of the chapel executes that purpose perfectly. The text details that it was an open structure composed of 4 arches.
But these arches weren't just load-bearing elements. They served as a canvas for storytelling. On top of the arches, they placed 4 distinct stone statues.
Which is a brilliant use of architecture as mass communication. We have to remember that the vast majority of the pilgrims who would visit this site in the 12th century were completely illiterate.
Right, a written parchment means nothing to them. They need a visual language.
So Dom Fuas translates the parchment into a 3-dimensional graphic novel in stone. Let's look at the cast of characters on the arches, as described by the text.
Okay, so you have the Virgin, Senhora de Nazaré. You have the saints whose relics were found in the box, S. Bartolomeo and S. Braz.
But the most crucial statues are the historical figures.
Yes. The text specifies there is a statue of King Di Rodrigo depicted holding the venerated image in his arms.
And standing next to him is a friar, representing the Abbot Fray Romano.
And what is the abbot holding in his stone hands? A box. The very time capsule they just dug out of the altar?
It is a masterclass in monumental memory. Dom Fuas understands that parchment is fragile. It can burn, it can rot, it can be lost.
So he encodes the data from the parchment directly into the masonry. Even if the written record dissolves into dust, the stones themselves will continue to tell the story of the ancient king, the abbot, and the hidden box.
The building becomes the memory. But there is one final architectural detail about the Capella da Memoria that I found fascinating.
What's that?
Well, despite building this new ornate structure, they didn't just pave over the old cave. The text notes that the chapel is subterranean.
Oh, right. It maintains its access via a staircase built to the right of the entrance, leading down into the earth.
That decision shows immense respect for the psychological geography of the original miracle. They preserve the physical requirement of descent.
To reach the sacred space, pilgrims still had to leave the bright open air and walk down into the dark, mimicking Dom Fuas's original humbling descent between the massive boulders.
They modernized this space without destroying its elemental gravity.
Okay, so the Capella de Memoria is built. The history is locked in stone, and this ushers in the final era of our chronological map, spanning a massive stretch of time from 1680 all the way to 1837.
This era represents the transformation from a localized pilgrimage site into an institution of monumental wealth and royal patronage.
The text bridges the centuries between Dom Fuas and the late 1600s with a very brief yet highly consequential sentence. It notes that over the years, various monarchs granted the site many rendas, rents, and incomes.
They weren't just visiting to pray, they were signing over lands, taxes, agricultural yields. The site became a financial powerhouse,
The spiritual currency of the miracle was converted into immense tangible wealth.
and that accumulation of wealth dictates the architectural evolution. A small subterranean chapel built by a 12th century military commander is no longer sufficient to reflect the glory of a site that is heavily funded by the crown.
The architecture must expand to match the economic reality, which brings us to the late 17th century.
The timeline jumps to the years 1680 through 1691.
During this decade, the local scale is completely abandoned. The text states they proceeded with the construction of a massive new temple.
And this is the monumental structure that dominates the Nazaré skyline today. The text shifts its vocabulary entirely here. We are no longer talking about humble caves or roughly hewn stones.
We are talking about grand, engineered triumph. The document luxuriates in the descriptive details of this new building.
It really does.
It describes a beautiful church laid out in the shape of a cruz latina, a massive Latin cross footprint, which is the standard imposing layout of major European cathedrals.
It's an architecture designed to project dominance and permanence.
And the stonework itself is a revelation. It is explicitly described not as rough or dry stacked, but as pedra labrada carved stone. And the carving features what the text calls ranijados capriciosos, capricious lacework.
Capricious lacework in stone is the ultimate display of absolute mastery over the physical world.
It's just incredible craftsmanship.
It requires immense wealth to commission artisans capable of taking rigid, unforgiving blocks of rock and carving them with such delicate precision that they mimic the chaotic, flowing movement of fine fabric.
It is the absolute antithesis of the primitive, unyielding boulders of the original Lapa.
The interior matches that grandeur, too, adorned with ornate paintings and crowned with an elegant cimborio, a towering dome or cupola.
The introduction of the cimborio represents a complete inversion of the site's spatial dynamic.
How so?
Well, for centuries, the focus was subterranean. You went down into the dark earth to find salvation. Now, with the dome, the architecture projects upward.
Ah, I see.
It reaches aggressively into the sky, broadcasting its power and wealth to the heavens and to anyone miles away on the coastline.
The transformation is staggering, and the text provides two final dates to close out its timeline, bringing us fully into the 19th century.
Yes, the years 1835 and 1837. In 1835, the record notes the purchase and installation of a magnifico orgam, a magnificent pipe organ.
Imagine the sheer acoustic force of that instrument.
Oh man, the deep vibrating bass notes filling the massive volume of that stone Latin cross, shaking the capricious lacework. It is the sound of absolute institutional triumph.
And finally, the text uses that era of installation to date the absolute completion of the architectural vision, stating that the construction of the soaring cupola was finalized in 1837.
That brings us to the end of the chronological map laid out in the Fastos Provincianos. It is an incredibly dense, epic journey contained within a relatively short archival record.
It forces us to reconcile the deep past with the modern landscape in a way that few historical texts can.
Let's just pull back for a second and look at the sheer scope of the timeline we just reconstructed. You start in the murky, undocumented shadows of an ancient crisis, with an abbot and a king desperately burying a sacred image in a dark coastal fissure.
Then the narrative jumps to 1179, where marginalized shepherds stumble upon the cave, instantly igniting a localized grassroots fervor of miracles that bypasses all church authority.
Those whispers travel up the mountain to a hardened royal enforcer, Dom Fuas Roupinho, who humbles himself by climbing down into a primitive birch cell to see the image.
A devotion that culminates on September 14th, 1182. A heavy, blinding fog during a violent, adrenaline-fueled hunt sends him galloping vertiginously toward a 1,200-foot abyss.
Only for his horse to freeze like a piece of the rock itself, a mere 2 palms from annihilation.
In shock and gratitude, he commands masons to build a temple, leading to the accidental discovery of a silk-lined time capsule in the old altar.
A parchment that proves the ancient legends were true all along.
He builds the Capella de Memoria, utilizing stone statues of the ancient king and abbot to literally build a backup drive of that parchment into the architectural arches.
And over the next several centuries, fueled by an endless stream of royal wealth, that small site of subterranean memory erupts into a sprawling titanic basilica.
A monument of capricious stone lacework, crowned by a sky-piercing dome and the booming thunder of a magnificent pipe organ in 1837.
From a desperate secret hidden in the dirt to a roaring monument of stone and sound, it is a stunning evolution. But we promise at the beginning of this deep dive that we wouldn't just map out the timeline.
Right, we want to extract the ultimate meaning here.
We have the fundamental points, but what is the final marking reflection? What does the specific archival text actually reveal about how humans operate?
If you look at the entire chronological sweep of the document, the narrative forces us to confront a very specific, profound dynamic. It is the relationship between terror, memory, and architecture.
The relationship between terror, memory, and architecture. I want to dig into that.
Consider the physical reality of the church that stands in Nazaré at the end of our timeline in 1837.
Okay.
The document describes an absolute behemoth, a massive footprint in the shape of a Latin cross, thousands of tons of intricately carved stone, grand sweeping paintings,
A towering, elegant dome engineered to dominate the skyline.
and a magnificent booming pipe organ. It is a structure of overwhelming weight and permanence. It is designed to outlast empires.
It is the architectural embodiment of something solid, unshakable, and eternal.
Exactly. But if we trace the timeline back to its absolute core, why does all of that stone and grandeur exist?
Right, where does it come from?
Every single block of that Latin cross, every delicate curve of the capricious lacework, every note played on that organ exists solely because of a gap of 16 inches.
The doigt palmos, the 2 palms from the edge.
Yes, and a microscopic fraction of a second of absolute paralyzing terror in the fog.
Wow.
If D. Fuas's horse's hoof strikes the ground just an inch further on September 14th, 1182, he plunges into the ocean.
The vow of gratitude is never spoken. The masons from Laria are never summoned.
The ancient silk-lined time capsule hidden in the altar is likely never found. The Capella da Memoria is never constructed.
And the subsequent centuries of monarchs never grant the immense wealth required to build the basilica.
Exactly. The entire centuries-long chain reaction of faith, art, and massive architecture simply vanishes into the Atlantic.
That is a staggering perspective. The entire weight of that 19th century monument is effectively balancing on a 16-inch sliver of rock.
It reveals exactly how humanity attempts to process salvation. We experience a moment of miraculous survival, a brush with the abyss. But that moment is inherently fleeting.
A second of terror evaporates the moment you realize you are safe. It is temporary.
But the human mind cannot accept that salvation is temporary. We are terrified of forgetting. So what do?
We build.
We use the heaviest, most unyielding materials on the planet. We drag massive blocks of stone up a mountain. We carve intricate art. We engineer soaring domes and booming music.
We do all of this to literally nail that single fleeting second of memory to the earth.
We build a cathedral to ensure that a microscopic moment of salvation is never ever permitted to fade into the fog. We fight the temporary nature of human terror with the absolute crushing permanence of architecture.
We fight the temporary nature of terror with the absolute permanence of architecture. That is an incredibly powerful lens to view history through. I think that is the perfect thought to leave you with today. Thank you for joining us on this chronological deep dive into the fastos of Nazaré. The next time you find yourself standing in the shadow of a massive, unshakable monument, don't just look up at the stone, look closer. Keep seeking out the hidden time capsules, the desperate vows, and the singular moments of suspended terror that are holding the entire thing up. We will see you on the next deep dive.